In this Photoshop demo, I'm going to show you a more complicated way. Well, I shouldn't say I'm going to make it more complicated. I want to show you an easier way to make complicated selection edges. That's what I meant to say, by using quick masks. So here in Photoshop, I'm going to go to File and Open, and in my Chapter 5, Folder 2, I have two files here. One is a picture of my son, and the other one is a picture of a background that I would like him to be sitting in front of. So I'm going to start down here and select both of those. Chapter 5, Folder 2, Quick Mask Selections. And I'm going to open them both. So what I have here is this background, and right up here in this other tab is our original photo. I want him to look like a big 200-foot tall baby, not sitting on the beach, but sitting in this lake. Okay, this is one of my favorite photos of him. So what I want to do is cut him out, but if I zoom in, he's a really complicated shape. His edges go in, and then they go around, then they come around his cheek and down his shoulder. We've also got the problem of his toes getting cut off in the photo and right there. So there's a few things that I need to do with this. So here's what I'm going to do. The last thing on earth you want to do is try to take a lasso tool and just slowly drag along the edge. This figure is way too complicated. It would take forever, and it probably wouldn't look good anyway. So I'm going to hit Command D and deselect that. What I'm going to do is make what's called a rough selection. Okay, I'm going to press and hold down and go to my polygon lasso tool. And I'm not going to try to select him right up to the edge. I'm going to select close to his edge. So I'll start right here, not right on the edge of his shirt, but just a little bit outside. I'm going to click and let go, click and let go, click, click, click. And I'm going to keep clicking just around the outer edges of this figure. You can see I'm not right on the edge of the hat, just outside. And I'm going to keep making these little clicks all the way around. Click, 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 click. Keep coming down. And when I run out of room, I can just go right off the edge of the photo. That's no problem. But if I come down, I just slightly bump the edge. You can see how it'll nudge the photo down when I keep hitting the bottom edge. So I'm going to click, click, go up and around this towel here, down this leg. And since he doesn't have a foot right there, I'm just going to cut him off at the ankle right there. Click, 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 click. Click my way back to the start. So again, when I've made my way back to the start, you're going to see that little loop next to your polygon lasso. It means you've looped all the way around, went all the way back to the start, and I click, and that's going to put a rough selection around him, meaning I have selected him and a little bit of the background. What I want to eventually have is a perfect cutout of him. Okay, so all I have to do here to prepare to update this selection to make it perfect, I'm going to hit D for default colors. That sets up black and white. Then I'm going to hit the letter Q. And Q stands for quick mask. So you always start with a selection, a rough selection. Then you hit the letter Q for a quick mask. Q gets into the quick mask. If I hit Q again, it gets out of the quick mask. Hit Q again and it goes into the quick mask. Okay, the default color of a quick mask is red. But let's say you were tracing out a picture of somebody on a beautiful sunset. Well, you wouldn't want red against a red sky. So right down here at the bottom of your toolbox, this is your quick mask icon. If I double click, I can change the color of my quick mask. Let's say I made it green. I'll click and select a shade of green, click OK. Now when I hit Q, I've got a green quick mask. The default should be red. So I can just double click this again, click the color, come back up to red, click OK, hit Q, and that's how you get the colors of your quick mask. What a quick mask allows you to do is paint the shape of a selection edge. And you paint with black and white. So once I have hit Q and I'm in a quick mask, I hit the letter D for default colors. Okay? Q for quick mask, D for default colors. And I'm going to zoom in right here on the back side of his shirt, right where these two little folds are. And I'm going to take my paintbrush. Okay, my brush is kind of small, so I'm going to hold Control and Option. We'll make it just a little bit bigger, and I'm going to drag down. I want a hard edge brush because I'm cutting out a harder edge figure here. I'll go with something like around 25 pixels or so. Not too big. And all you're going to do is paint around the folds. But here's the problem. This circle is too big for this little corner. Okay, so here's how I paint. I start on the body and I click and drag. And you'll notice as I drag, I have to go in because that's a really small corner right there. How do I go into a corner when my brush is too big? So you go over the edges of the figure. Then it's simply hitting the letter X and scraping off your quick mask like that. Okay? When you paint with white, you will erase the mask. When you hit X for black, you will cover up the background that you don't want to work on. So our goal is to only expose the kid in this photo. We don't want to work on the background, so we should cover up the background by painting with black. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. Make my brush maybe a little bit smaller, Control key and Option key. And again, when your brush is too big, you start inside the figure. Now the other issue is how do you paint smooth curves when your hand will kind of move around as you move? You're a human. You're not going to make perfect curves. So my solution is I never paint a single curve. Here's how I do it. I'm going to start right here. I'm just going to click and let go. Then I'm going to hold my Shift key. Move a little bit. Hold the Shift key the entire time. Go click, 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 click. I've been holding Shift the entire time. What Shift key does is this. Click, Shift click. It paints in straight lines. What I've done down here is just painted a series of very short straight lines which look like a perfect curve. So I'm going to hit X for a second, erase this little mark. X to go back to black, and I'll continue right here. I just got to start again. So when I start, I click and let go. Now I hold Shift. Shift click, 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 Shift click. Painted another curve. Now I'm painting into the body. So in order to paint out these perfect little corners, I hit X for white and I scrape off my mask right there. There's a nice little corner right there. I'll paint with white right here and paint out a nice little corner against the sleeve right there. Paint out a nice little corner right there. Hit X to switch to black. I'll click once to start, and then Shift click, 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 Shift click. You get the idea. What we're trying to do is cover up the background. We don't want to see any part of the background. So notice how I am ever so slightly painting just a little bit over the edge of the kid. You don't want little pieces of bright towel to be stuck to his shoulder when you go to cut him out. So you slightly cut into the figure. Okay, so I'm going to continue here. Click to pick up where I left off. Then I hold shift and shift click, 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 shift click. Hit X to switch to white, and I scrape that off the back side of his cap right there. There's a nice little corner right there. Hit X to switch back to black. I'm ready to continue painting, so it's click to begin. Then I hold shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, and I'm going to keep shift clicking all the way around this cap. If I run out of room, I just hold my space bar for the hand tool. Now I shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click. If you accidentally make a mistake and do something like that, this is why you use quick masks. It's not a mistake. It's a temporary little issue. I just hit the letter X. Scrape off my mistake. I'm human. I'm going to make mistakes. Hit the letter X. Click to continue, then shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click. Now when I have longer, almost straight edges, I can add a bigger gap. Shift click, big gaps, because I'm getting straighter edges here along the cap. Up along the top, these are all curves, so I'm going to be doing a lot of shift clicking. Like this. Click, shift, 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 click, 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 hold shift the entire time, and just click multiple times. It's always click and move, 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 while I'm holding the shift key. Shift click, 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 shift click. And as I do these tiny little movements, holding shift and clicking the entire time, it looks like I've painted a nice smooth curve around that cap. I'll just keep shift clicking here. Shift click around the curve of his cheek, because obviously I want to have a nice smooth edge to his face. So I'm going to do short little distances as I shift click every time. That'll create a nice smooth curve around his cheek. Shift click, shift click, shift click down his neck. And I'm coming to a corner, so I'm going to go past the corner. I cut into the figure. X for white. And I scrape out that little corner right there. X for black. Click to continue, then shift click, shift click, shift click all the way down the edge to continue here. Short little distances to get a nice curve around that shoulder right there. I can hold my space bar for the hand tool and push more of this image up. Shift click, shift click, shift click. There's another corner, so I cut into the body. X for white. And I scrape off the mask from his body to make another nice corner. X for black. Click to continue, then shift click, shift click, shift click. And I'll keep shift clicking my way around the edge of this figure. There's another corner into his body. X for white, and I'll scrape that off right into that corner there. X for black, and when I'm ready to continue, click to continue, then shift click, shift click, shift click. Now his arm is pretty straight, so I can add a bigger gap between every time I shift click here. We'll pull that back up. Shift click, shift click, shift click. Do some shorter distances here for these little curves around his chubby little fingers. Shift click, shift click, shift click. There we go. His leg is pretty straight, so I'll shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, and right about there. Okay, I can just let go and paint in that background. Now, since he's going to be sitting in the water, you're not going to really see this leg, so I don't have to shift click here. I'll just kind of freehand paint that little curve, because we don't want half a foot in our final image anyway. So we're going to blend his leg into the water. So I don't have to be really precise about these edges right in here, because that's pretty much where he's going to be sitting in the water anyway. So I'll just kind of freehand paint these. X for white, scrape it off his shorts right there. X for black, and I'll continue to cover up the shorts right around there. X for white, scrape that off. X for black. Click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click down his leg. Shift click all the way down. There we go. And we'll do the same thing over here. Click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click up the side of his leg. Shift click all the way up into here. Get around his shorts right there. Keep shift clicking around those little curves. I can paint in that little missing block. Click, and then shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click my way around. Paint in the rest of that background that's a little too far away from his body. Click, shift 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 click. I think you get the idea, but I tend to repeat things to myself as I work. So shift click, shift click, shift click. X for white, and I'll paint out that little corner right there. X for black. Click, and then shift click, shift click, shift click to continue right back to the start. So now I can take my zoom tool and zoom back out. You can see all the background has now been covered or masked out. We're not working on the background, so I should cover it. It's kind of like painting a wall in a bedroom in your house. If you don't want paint to get on the carpet, you don't want to work on the carpet, you cover it up. If you want to work on the wall, leave it exposed. So I don't want to work on the background, so I cover it up. Okay, the only other thing left is this little gap between his arm and his body. So I'm just going to come in and paint right here with black. Click, shift 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 click. And then I'll paint right here. Click and drag around there, just kind of freehand to cover up this area. Then I can hit X for white. Click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click around the little curves in his shorts. Click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click around the edges of his shirt. And just cover up the gap between his arm and his body. Okay, so that looks really good. Okay, when you are done, all you have to do is just hit the letter X, and now you have updated your selection edge. So now we can see it runs right up his back, right around the edges of his face, right down his shoulder. So it's always starting with a rough selection, Q for quick mask, D for default colors. You paint with black and white, and then Q when you're done. Okay, our goal is to move him up and over into this background. So what you do is you switch to your move tool, and you got to keep an eye on your move tool. Now what you're going to do is use a feature called drag and drop. I'm going to go inside the selection, drag my cursor. I'm paying attention to the black triangle of my cursor. I'm going to drag him all the way up to the second tab, pause for a few seconds. Do not let go of the mouse. Pull your mouse back into this photo and then let go of the mouse to drag and drop. Okay, let me do that again. I'm going to delete that top layer. If you click and drag up and then you let go, nothing's going to happen. Okay, if you click and drag and let go too soon, you're just going to move him in the photo. So you got to drag him all the way up to the tab, wait a second, pull him back in, then let go of the mouse. Now obviously he is too big for this scene. I want his butt kind of planted in the water here. So I'm going to hit Command T to transform my drawing, my photo, my figure. Okay, if you hit Command T, you gotta see the upper corner of the photo, and I can't really see that. So just pull it down. Then you can just click and drag a corner, go inside the photo and move him back up. And there his butt's kind of planted in the water. Make him a little bit smaller right there. Okay, big 200-foot tall baby sitting in the lake. And I like that positioning right about there. So I'm going to hit return. Okay, obviously he is amputated on the foot and we're missing all this part. I want him planted in the water. So what I'm going to do is make a layer mask. I'm going to delete just a little bit of the bottom part of his body. Remember, if you want to erase, you're going to go to your layer, click the third button on the left, add layer mask. You click it once. There's my layer mask, and just like a quick mask, now you're working with a layer mask, and masks work with black and white. So as soon as I make that layer mask, D for default colors, X to switch to black. If your layer mask is white, you got to paint with the opposite color, obviously. What I want to do is make him just fade a little bit at the bottom. So I'm going to come right up here to my gradient. As soon as I click on that, I want to come up to my gradient option right here and click the little pop-up. Okay, I'm on basic gradients. So I can open up that folder, make sure I'm on the first default black to white gradient. And here's what a gradient on a layer mask does. Okay, if I started on his cheek and I drag down, I will fade from black at the top to white where I stopped. If I start at the bottom, click and drag a short line, I get a hard gradient. Drag a longer line, I get a softer gradient, like the spirit of the child, the ghost of the child. And if I drag a really long line, I can gradually fade photos into each other. Okay, the problem now is I don't really see where his bottom half is. So here's a simple solution. I start at the top and drag down. That's not a problem because we're going to need the bottom. Okay, I'm going to start just above this little gap between his legs right here. Start maybe right here on his wrist. Hold my shift key and drag a short line up, very short like this. And when I let go of the mouse, by holding shift, I got a nice horizontal edge. See, the white on the layer mask is up here. White means leave your photo alone. Black at the bottom means delete. So by using a gradient, I can get a soft little blend right there. Okay, with my move tool, this whole bottom half of him is gone. I want him planted right there. But the issue is, if somebody is sitting in a lake, they're going to have a reflection. He can't just sit here while all the rest of the water is plain. So what I have to do is make a copy of this kid so I can put a reflected copy in the water. So the way you make a copy or a duplicate is Command J to jump up to another layer. Now physically on your screen, it's going to look like you didn't do anything because when you hit Command J to duplicate layers, they sit right on top of the original. Okay, you can see on your layers panel, there is a copy. You can move it. You can see there's two. I'll just go to edit and undo the move. But there is a copy sitting right on top of the original. So to flip him around, I go to edit to change my layer, transform him by flipping him vertically. Now he'll be sitting on his head. Okay, what I want to do is move him straight down. So I'm going to click and drag. And notice after I drag, he kind of goes all over the place. So after you start to drag, you hold your shift key. Shift means perfect. So I'm moving him perfectly vertical. Right about there where they kind of meet like a reflection would. If you have a figure causing a reflection in the water, the reflection is going to be darker than the figure. So every layer in Photoshop, right above, you see this bar that says normal. These are normal pixels. This is a normal photograph. What I can do is blend. These are blending modes. So when I hover over multiply, you can see that the colors are going to get darker. Hover over the word and it shows you what that word is going to do, how it's going to blend the colors together with the water. So I can try multiply, color burn, which makes it way too blue. Linear burn looks nice and dark. Darker color makes some of the grays look pretty bad. These all make areas brighter. Overlay kind of saturates. Not a lot of these are working too well, so I like this linear burn right there. Okay, multiply is all right, but linear burn goes a little darker. I'll click that. If that is too dark for your taste, right next to your blending modes, you have your opacity. And I can click this little triangle pop up and slide that back a little bit just to fade it out a little bit into the water. And now we have a big 200-foot tall baby sitting in the lake. Okay, I don't need this first photo anymore. I'm done cutting him out. I can close that. I don't need to save it because I've used it for what I needed it to do. And you're going to save this as your last name, first name, Lake, or Jonah in the Lake, or Lake Gregory, whatever you want to call it. Just last name, first name, and Lake. But that's how you use quick masks to cut out figures, Command J to duplicate layers, edit, transform. You can flip layers, you can blend layers, you can adjust opacity. We've learned a lot about Photoshop just in this one little exercise with this big, tall, freakish baby sitting in the lake. So that's how Photoshop works. Can't wait to show you the next thing.